Your AI agents are out there right now, touching your customer data, your financials, your emails, and you have zero idea what they're doing with it. Most founders are one stolen API token away from a bankruptcy Reddit post. It happened to someone last week, and the worst part is they never saw it coming because they were too busy moving fast to look down at the cliff they were running towards. Now, your AI agent has a memory. That memory has no permission system. So when your analyst asks it a question, it might answer with residue from the CEO's private emails still floating in its context window. No breach required, no hacker needed, just an agent doing exactly what it was built to do. But what if you could wrap every single agent you run in a security layer so tight that even someone stole your credentials, those credentials physically cannot leave your machine? What if every token, every session, every tool call had a guardian watching it in real time, like a hound at the gates? Here's the question I want you to sit with. If your AI agents got subpoenaed tomorrow, could you actually account for everything they have touched, read, and sent on your behalf? Welcome to AI for Founders. I'm Ryan Estes. My guest today is Jasson Casey, CEO of Beyond Identity, and he's pulling back the curtain on Ceros, a free trust execution layer for AI agents that every founder running Claude Code or any agentic workflow needs to know about right now. This one is for builders moving fast who refuse to get burned. And the AI for Founders newsletter at aiforfounders.co is where I break down exactly what founders need to know before they build it, pitch it, or ship it. If you're not subscribed, your competitors probably are, so go get smarter at aiforfounders.co. And if this episode made you think twice about your AI setup, a 5-star review would mean the world and keeps these conversations coming to you every week. Speaking of getting in front of the right people, if you're a founder, operator, or investor who wants to build serious authority through podcasting, Kitcaster.com is the agency that gets you booked on the shows your audience is already listening to. They handle the outreach, the positioning, the pitching, all of it, so you just show up and deliver. Go check them out at Kitcaster.com. That's Kitcaster by Moburst. Jasson, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Good to be back.
You bet. Yeah. Now, people, if they want to get a deep dive, now, first of all, Jasson is head honcho over at Beyond Identity. That's beyondidentity.com. We're going to talk about beyondidentity.ai. And we had an interview previously, a couple of months ago, that kind of took a deep dive into kind of the core of Beyond Identity's platform, which is identity defense, basically getting rid of passwords so you can have higher accuracy with authentication. But you're back today to talk about a really important subject and a new product launch for you guys called Ceros. Why don't you give us a kind of a high-level view of this new product, and congratulations.
Thanks. So yeah, so Ceros project, it's a play on words of Cerebus, but Ceros is available from a domain perspective. And Ceros is really our response to non-human identity. And the first use case is AI assistance. So we take a step back. Every organization right now is faced with a dilemma, and whether they're putting it on themselves or it's being put on them by their board or their investors. And that dilemma is the world has changed. AI is now here. It changes everything. What are you doing about it? How are you becoming more efficient? How are you leveraging AI in your organization to be AI native, right? So like, gone are the days of digital transformation, and now we're talking about AI transformation. And there's various milestones of AI transformation, right? Like, did you turn on AI in the entire like tech stack that your business already uses, and then you've called yourself AI enabled? Clearly that's superficial. Clearly that's not what we're talking about. Or have you really kind of asked the fundamental questions of, why is my business organized the way it is? What are the assumptions around my business's organization and processes, rooted in the expectation that a human has to do all of this work, and a human has a certain cost, and a human has to work in a certain way? AI native means you question all of these foundations, and you're able to kind of realize that some of them can be given up, and that you can actually change your business architecture, and you can simplify or really restructure how you operate. And AI enables us. So that's kind of like the positive. That's the benefit, right? I can run fast. I can do things I didn't have to do before. I need less capital, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the dark side of this is when you look at how an agent works, when you look at when an agent is doing its best, what you have to give it, it's no different really than an employee or a contractor. You have to give it access to systems and services. You have to, some of these systems and services require secrets and credentials. You have to give it access to customer data. You have to give it access to financial data if you want the benefit for that part of the business. And then unlike a human, right? Like you can't really train the AI. You can maybe steer it a little bit, but training is decided for you by the big model providers. And so yeah, there's a lot of security concerns that you've got to kind of navigate there. And at the zoom out, we see big companies kind of doing one or two things, either hitting the pause button and saying, stop, let's figure this out. We'll only allow it to be used in exceptional circumstances with very limited risk and scope. Or the other end of the spectrum, which is, this is the way of the future. You guys just let me know when you're going to figure out how to deal with it. But we're going to risk accept this for now and just run real fast. Because if we don't, we're going to get beat by this other company. Ceros is our response to that fundamentally insolvable dilemma, right? Like a business can't operate at those two barbells. Those are kind of two extremes. Ceros is our answer of how do you actually run as fast as you can? How do you truly transform your business to be AI native while not blindly accepting the security risk that this agent will bring into your environment? So Ceros is what we call a trust execution layer for the agent. It gives the agent an identity. It glues that identity to the device that agent executes from. It tracks the provenance and the delegated authorization of that agent from a human user or from another agent that spun it up. It does a bunch of other things as well, but for the organization that uses Ceros, at a bare minimum, you get two things: visibility into what's going on into your environment with the same kind of beyond identity guarantee we talked about last time. Credentials don't move. So there will be no beyond identity managed credentials that the agent, through inaction or coercion, can leak, steal, exfil, et cetera. Or you can use some of the more advanced features of Ceros and actually put policy around what's actually going on in your environment. So I just put a lot out there. Let me stop real quick and let you respond.
You bet. I love it. And it's very relevant to what's going on right now. It reminds me of the commercial in the 90s where it would say, do you know where your children are right now? Kind of asking the same thing. Do you know where your AI agents are right now? And the answer is largely no.
Do you know what they're doing?
Yeah. What are they doing right now? So,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, companies are coming to this conclusion of kind of the risk they've been taking maybe the last 12 months with AI within their organization. And I think you probably have a great seat of what some of this is because it's not being disclosed. Obviously, if you have a bunch of big oops, you're just going to kind of keep that under wraps, but you see it happening. So I would say timeline wise, probably about a year ago is when companies started being like, okay, we're getting open AI subscriptions for everybody on the team. And we need to figure out how we're going to leverage AI to create unfair advantages. And so, people start like dumping financial data into OpenAI servers. They're God only knows what kind of IP went onto there. So maybe you could give us some like nightmare scenarios of truly kind of the risk that is involved with just like, let's say, using the big LLMs unrestrictedly.
Yeah. So a couple things, right? Like, number one, when you use an LLM, there is some specific setup that you need to go through that authorizes the LLM to essentially train on your data or not, right? So number one, you really don't want them training on your proprietary data. So we've certainly seen people do everything that you just said in the unmanaged instance, right? Just lock, stock, and barrel. So the implication there is future models might actually be able to regurgitate some of that data as it gets trained on, right? No different than I'm sure you and your listeners have heard of these scenarios where pick a Harry Potter book, open it to a random page, drop 10 words from a sentence into ChatGPT or Anthropic, and it will finish the chapter for you, right? And this just has to do, I think the study found something like a 70 to 80% reproduction rate of the Harry Potter novels. And again, like the novels aren't lock, stop, copied in the model, but the models do train against these the source material in a way to be able to kind of reproduce them in a fairly effective way. You don't want that to happen to your information, right? So that's kind of the simple one. More interesting one, and this one's made the round, so they probably heard about this, is the agent has access to a data store, and the authorization levels and the scoping of what's in that data store is not actually threaded through the agent model, right? So let's say somebody, an analyst, makes a query for something, and that agent has essentially a residue in its context window left over from some analysis it was doing on the CEO's email. And so the contents of that CEO's email, which were a residue in the context window, basically are then, the LLM is going to happily reuse it, right? And push it back into the response. So the what's happening there is this concept of data permissions and threading, right? So so these agents work with a context. A context is kind of like a memory, but not exactly. We push stuff into the context until we reach the limits of the context. When we reach the limits of the context, then we do a little bit of spring cleaning, right? What do we not wear anymore? What do we still wear regularly? Let's throw some of it away and whatnot. There's no permissions in the context. There's no ownership bits in the context. There really is no concept of data versus instructions in that context. So we see a lot of people actually build out agents that don't quite recognize that, and essentially map data sources and kind of invocation environments without really thinking through. It's, I don't know if you would still call it privilege escalation, but it kind of is data access privilege escalation, just through either the agent not being smart enough to do it initially, or the agent not clearing its context, or the agent not doing per context based flushes on a per user basis. Some other interesting things that we've seen, MCP tools and skills directories on GitHub, basically hosting malicious prompts and doing indirect injection through like a plugin load of this malicious skill. Or a malicious tool execution from an MCP, from like a public MCP service. Some things that we haven't seen that I suspect exist or will be coming soon are like prompt assembly. So remember what I was talking about in that context window, you can assemble things over time. My exploit, why not assemble the exploit over time, right? Like if I understand enough about the agent and the looping, or if I understand enough about how memory is used to repersist things into the context off of disk, I don't have to assemble my prompt in one go, right? And then once I've assembled my prompt, my adversarial prompt, I could even potentially get it persisted, like persistence in kind of the classic malware model, right? And I could potentially get it persisted and re-brought into the context on certain kind of context trigger words. So I think these things are coming. The things that I think are exciting, and this is kind of the stuff that we're starting to kind of do some pioneering work on, is actually tracking risk at a context level. So every time your agent makes an LLM call, you could think of that as a context loop, we think of it as a context loop, right? It builds the context, it goes out. The LLM will give some sort of summary information, maybe a set of tool call executions. Every tool that the agent then can execute against, it has an identity, it has a provenance, it should be on a bill of materials. In theory, it could have scopes and authorizations attached to it, right? So you could actually track that through the loop. And so you could almost think of it like paint colors, right? Like whenever you mix colors in the context, there's rules of mixing. And, maybe red is risky and blue is safe. And certain types of mixings only go to red. And when my context is red, maybe my permissions shrink and my tool execution list is much, much smaller than before. And as my context gets flushed or pruned, it goes blue again and my permissions kind of come back. So getting in more into like dynamic permission execution, that's more of a defender's toolkit. But we see a lot of kind of exciting things like that, both on the adversary and the defender side.
This episode is brought to you by a dangerous idea. It's called reading. specifically the AI for Founders newsletter. 47,000 founders strong now, and it's the good stuff. No top 10 AI tools that will change your life written by someone who doesn't ship product. It's just real breakdowns of what's actually working in AI. Who's raised, who failed, who pivoted, and which founders quietly built $1 million in ARR while everyone else was arguing on X. It's written for people building with AI. Every week you get tactical frameworks, unfair advantages, breakdowns of real companies, and the occasional existential question about whether your startup is intelligent or just well-branded. It's free, it's sharp, it might mildly offend your current workflow. Go to aiforfounders.co and subscribe before your competitor does. Because the only thing worse than being replaced by AI is being replaced by a founder who reads. That's the newsletter at aiforfounders.co. Now back to the show. Yeah, and that kind of customization has become critical, because I guess where we're at right now. Well, I mean, last summer we started to have agents, but we're like in the midst of like post OpenClaw and what that means, to have looping, to have agents like out there running amok. And so really what I'm seeing now is organizations are saying like, okay, we need to dial up a giant MCP of absolutely everything. Absolutely everything. So there's context so which we can build, agents that aren't siloed by division or by anything. So they're creating an MCP that has everything, all the emails, all the note taker apps, all the Slacks, everything. Everything's getting dumped into here so they can create these really effective agents. And then what's going to happen is as people are bringing those online, they're going to realize that they just trained up a really valuable skill set, a really valuable agent. So you're going to have a marketplace. People will be like, hey, don't do XYZ for Google Calendar and Slack. We already have that. We can build that in now. So and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like with Ceros, you'll be able to have kind of a customization in the marketplace where you can design and build agents with a trust layer built in that's fully customizable to the scope of what you want. And not only that, but as you're kind of purchasing agents in a marketplace, you can also maybe scan to see if there is that malware, because that's a big apprehension right now for people to dive into OpenClaw at all. Is like, boy, it seems like there's a big gamble there.
Yeah. Ceros, the high level of Ceros is Ceros lets you essentially execute an agent with a level of safety, right? So you don't have to understand all the bits and bytes of how that agent was built and how it's going to work. If you wrap it with Ceros, Ceros will contain it. Ceros will give you visibility, and then Ceros will let you set policy on what risks you're willing to accept or not, right? So that's kind of Ceros at a high level. But yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon, right? The agents are incredibly powerful, and we're in that phase right now of not just all the things that it can do, but it can tear down a lot of these walls. Like you were saying, look, you don't need Google Calendar. You don't need this. You don't need that. There's another interesting way of looking at it. Imagine you're going to strike off and start your company today, right? New company today. An interesting thought experiment. Let's say the only thing you buy to start with is a subscription to GitHub, a subscription to Claude Code, and maybe Google Workspace, right? Because you still need email, right? Why do you need anything else? Right? Because I'm sure maybe not everyone's at the same journey, so I'll explain a little bit. But like as you mature and learn how to use an AI agent, right? You always start with prompting the agent with discovery, then you move into getting the agent to do things for you. Then you start to realize that when you're just prompting the agent to do things for you, the responses can be varied. They're not necessarily consistent. They're not necessarily complete with respect to all the things you want it to enumerate over. And so you then realize, all right, I'm in a slightly different pattern. I want an agent to build essentially a skill, which is a combination of like deterministic scripts that always do exactly what you say and always enumerate everything, and probabilistic prompting that wraps and pipelines those scripts together, right? So it's kind of like the natural phase of evolution. And as you start to do this, you start to realize that like, all right, the power of my organization is really about how much of my data I can get to this agent. And then everyone will say, well, I wonder if I can kind of reach into my database X. I wonder if I can reach into Salesforce. I wonder if I can reach into that. But then the second thing you realize, especially if you're starting from scratch, is like, why do I even need that to start with? I have a repo, Git does a great job of telling me about files that have changed over time. It does a great job of tracking identity of those changes. It does a great job of telling you about cryptographic provenance of each of those changes, right? So yeah, why wouldn't I want my marketing and my product docs to be in the Git repo? Because then I could do things like have a series of skills or subagents that's always running the consistency check between product marketing copy, product management, product spec, engineering spec, and QA spec, right? And then code reviews, and like just having it in a tight loop and always kind of coming out and saying, here are your errors and here are your omissions, here are your inconsistencies, right? I could go on and on and on with this, but like that just opens a completely different way, I think, of thinking about how you organize a company, a business.
I'm gonna hover here for a second, largely because we're kind of doing this anamorphic thing, where it's like I have my swarm of agents, and I have the architect, and I have the marketing director, and I have the analysis. So what we're doing is that we're giving them human characteristics, and you've seen this before in emerging technologies when like all the skeuomorphic stuff was happening with the iPhone. Like if you wanted to like have a potentiometer, it looked like a knob because it's familiar to us, and then slowly like that kind of dissipates. Like
Yeah.
just when we're talking about the advancement of where AI agents are going, do you think the like can it kind of humanizing of them into roles is like limiting kind of the way we can think about how they actually can work? Because to your point, yeah, we build everything up and we kind of want to give them positions so there's kind of a checks and balances. Also, just so it makes sense to my mental org chart. But is
Yeah.
there another way to do it?
Yeah, so I think so. I suspect so. I'm only hedging because I still think we're early, but we balance in the other direction. So our documentation is actually more optimized for agent ingestion than human ingestion, and that's purposeful. So right when we think about the agentic workflow, you're immediately confronted with the fact that an agent will be able to bury you in paperwork, right? Like an agent is like the big law firm that's coming after you. They'll always be able to just bury you in tombs and tombs of stuff. You can't hope to keep up, right? So what do you do? Well, I would say the knee-jerk reaction is I'm going to get an agent to manage my agent. And maybe that's appropriate in some circumstances, but not for this particular problem. For this particular problem, you have to think of it more of what is the lens that I can measure the output of the agent through that could be deterministic. And not every problem fits that category, but a lot of them do. And so we skew thinking not of agents as being representations of humans, but we think of them more in terms of kind of business functional outcomes. And we try and structure our documentation in the repo to be optimal for their ingestion. So to make that a little bit more specific, what is the smallest markdown file in terms of not consuming too much of the context that sets enough of the constraints I need for this particular agent to write great product marketing copy that stays inside the guardrails of my product roadmap, but that also mirrors the writing styles of X, Y, or Z, depending on the particular task, right? And I don't think I would have necessarily written like a memo, an email, or something like that to someone in marketing to do that, right? But we are for this agent that's basically helping us refresh our copy. I'll give you another example. I try and do a lot of analysis on what people are talking about. And the analysis that I try and do is like rate of change analysis. Like, is a topic ascendant or is a topic on decline? And so I'm trying to figure out, all right, how do I do this? How do I get this into the agent itself in a deterministic way? And so what we ended up doing is we had the agent build a browser plugin. The browser plugin basically follows me on my morning research when I'm kind of reading all of these things. The browser plugin creates a JSON squirt or a JSON blob of the content of when I'm in research mode of any of these particular things. And then the minute this shows up on my machine, my agent has already built a script that basically processes this and then does analytics and uses the agent for things like entity analysis, topic analysis, sentiment, all of that kind of stuff. And then it invokes a script, right? So again, getting back to determinism, to then figure out things like rate of change. Like, are they talking about this more this week than last week, this month than last week? Are they talking about it less? Can we use this as an indication of shift in focus? So, like, again, I don't think I would have ever been successful asking a marketer to go do that for me. It probably wouldn't have been a great use of their time. But it was 2 hours of mucking around with Claude, and now it's a functional pipeline, and it's a ton of documentation there. But it's not written for me; it's written for Claude. You know.
Interesting. In the language that best suits it, and then basically it's translating that back to English to speak to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating because we're in the infancy of what we're calling agents right now. You know,
Oh yeah.
I have my entire repos in a Claude Code project that are prioritized top to bottom that I have notes on. And what I was working on is something very similar. I want something that follows me across browser tabs as it's kind of keeping tabs on my work and things like that to make basically recommendations, predictive recommendations of how what I'm using could be applied to the projects I'm working on.
Yeah.
You know, and I haven't had much success, but I did have a recommendation on this game I'm working on. Can I do a quick tangent and tell you about this game I'm working on? Okay. Because largely when we're talking about AI stuff, I think it's valuable not to think about it as an engineer, but rather a scientist, which is to say, I want to have little experiments going so I can feel my way around of like, dude, what's the limitations of what can be done here? And that will affect my work all the way downstream. So anyway, I put together the game, and the game is basically you're in a Waymo car and stuck in a blizzard, and the Waymo can't drive because all the senses or sensory cameras and stuff are covered by the snow. What you don't know is that the blizzard's never going to end. This is an apocalyptic blizzard. It's taking over mankind. And so as this kind of slowly realization happens, that then you have to start using whatever's in the car to fashion tools, to go hunt small game, to build shelter, to try and build fire. And so it's building on it like that. Eventually you have to leave the car, and we're kind of getting into like what that's going to be. So right now it's just kind of a text-based game, but I built a browser basically to that reads kind of the articles I'm interested in and then offers ideas of how it could affect the plot, because ultimately I want this to kind of evolve into I don't know, some kind of post-apocalyptic weird war zone, but we'll get there. And it's not great, but it was a good example of like kind of thinking outside the box to see what exactly is possible with agents as it's kind of like traveling with you in your work. A lot of big, I think, productivity gains is going to come from, AI observing your workflows and making recommendations of how to tighten everything up, either by creating custom software or to actually recommend software that already exists. So, and we're not quite there yet, but right now, this is what I'm experimenting with, what my friends are experimenting with. And I'd love, and really why I wanted to have a conversation with you is because I am the guy with the repo and Claude Code being like, what can we do? Now, what I don't know when I'm sitting there in the terminal, cranking out code is like, what should I be worried about right now? Like I could really use Ceros because actually I don't know what I don't know as far as like exactly what kind of exposure I'm walking into blindfolded. So in perspective of Ceros, just kind of the UI, like if before I'm preparing to get into my projects, or maybe I have an agent built, how do I integrate Ceros into the project that I'm working on?
So that part's actually super simple. So if you go to beyondidentity.ai, there's a super simple sign up to create a Ceros tenant. And for personal use, we don't even charge you. You guys can just use it for free. Ceros is a little agent. So you install it actually just like you install Claude. I believe it basically it's just like a curl with a URL, and then you pipe bash. It will install locally. It will update itself to kind of always stay latest. And right now, you just type Ceros space Claude, and then any Claude parameters you want, and that's it. We will probably be pushing an update soon to where we basically will install an alias. So you won't even have to type Ceros if you have us installed. Anytime you execute Claude, we'll just be there. So the whole idea with the Claude agent is to not really get in your way and to not change your workflow. The Claude or the Ceros UI from an administrator perspective is about showing you what agents are active, what they're doing. So think of it like a set of tiered discovery. So what AI agents exist, i.e. installed in my environment? Of those installed agents, which ones actually have active sessions? Of those active sessions, what ecosystem do they appear to be using? Bedrock, Vertex, Anthropic, NVIDIA, Olama, what kind of models, blah, blah, blah. Right now, we're going very, very deep on Claude Code. So if you actually dig into Claude Code, we're going to report on essentially the Claude Code style assets. So Claude Code style assets, think of it as what is it? Skills, plugins, hooks, MCP services, LSP, etc. Permissions. I'm going to forget some. There's like 8, but all of these represent surface area for security management, whether it's exfil, prompt injection, over permissioning, etc. And that's basically what we're going to eyeball and watch. We also have a policy layer that lets you actually express. You think of it as like letting you paint your tolerance to risk. Another way is just letting you express what's allowable and what's not allowable in your environment. And it basically would supersede anything that you kind of hit yes, no, maybe on when you're actually kind of, doing the old person casino gamble exercise. Yeah, we're basically going super deep on Claude Code to start with. We'll do the agent discovery for all the agents, but like the agent specific artifacts that I just walked through right now is really focused on Claude Code.
Okay. So as I'm developing, I have Ceros installed. It's going to prevent me from making any mistakes that I already outlined what I don't want to happen. That's safe to say?
Yeah. Also, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, please.
The other thing that I almost forget to mention sometimes, the classic beyond identity property of having a device-bound attestation, a device-bound credential, continuous posture, continuous authorization, basically a credential that never moves, like that's there as well. So if you're just running Claude today, Anthropic gives you an API token. And that API token, whether it's served up through OAuth or whether it's served up from the API token interface, it's stealable, right? You can copy it and paste it elsewhere and use it elsewhere. So on one end, service theft, on the other end, like misdirection, right? Like get your token, start running nefarious content through there, get Anthropic to flag you as a bad guy, shut your service down, and then I kind of go do the thing I really want to do, right? So when you're running Ceros, that can't happen. We firewall that Anthropic token essentially in our cloud environment. The only thing that exists from our cloud environment down to your endpoint where Claude is running is our device-bound credentials. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about initial access or kind of the session-based identity and the session-based authentication. All of those are device-bound. And for the nerds in the audience, we're using something called Depop for the session. And on the device-bound stuff, it's just our classic device-bound credentials in the T's, whatever the environment happens to be. Anything from Apple Secure Enclave to TPM2 to AWS Nitro. But yeah, so those properties, which is kind of like the beyond identity foundation, is there as well. So you will not suffer credential theft, session hijacking, anything like that if you're running Ceros from day zero.
Amazing. So that's to say that all the API keys are stored safe locally on my machine, unless someone was actually here, and I'm bound and gagged in the closet. That's not going to happen.
But the API keys aren't stored on your machine. The API
it's in the cloud. That's right.
Yeah, the API keys are in the cloud. The only thing in your machine are keys that physically can't come off your machine.
Yeah.
Right. So remember that trusted execution environment. Quick mental image. Imagine a jail. And there's a notary in the jail, right? Monkey with a pen. That monkey can't come out of the jail. The jail has no door. And the way you authenticate is you get the monkey to sign stuff for you. So someone gives you a challenge, you stick it through the bars, the monkey signs the challenge, it gives it back to you, right? That's called a naked signing. The monkey sometimes attaches policies to signing, right? So it could attach a biometric. It could attach a local PIN. In fact, you probably experienced this type of monkey policy when you buy coffee, with your iPhone or with your Android device, right? You tap and you smile, or you tap and you punch a pin in. Same thing's happening there. That pin or that biometric is being turned into call it an HMAC. That's being sent into through that jail bar. The monkey then looks at it, and if it's what it expects, it then says, "All right, now give me the document or the challenge." You send that through the bars, and it then signs the challenge and sends the signed challenge back to you. But the monkey and the pin can't leave the jail.
What'd that monkey do?
A monkey's really happy just to sign stuff.
He loves it in there. He's very safe inside.
Yeah.
Amazing. That sounds really cool. And then also the just the monitoring. So like knowing, and is that a dashboard that you log into where it says like, okay, here's where all your agents, here's what they're doing, here's what they're working on, here's all the APIs, keys that they have, here's all the tokens they're using. Basically, it's just kind of a live ticker.
Yeah, exactly.
Ooh, that seems highly satisfying to keep an eye on.
So our first goal really is discovery. Like we already have policy there. But like we're putting more effort into discovery. So if you are using this product, you'll see a lot of rich dashboards, but you'll also see them probably change on a week-to-week basis, because that's where we're putting a lot of our resource and energy. The thing that I want to shift to by summer, I guess I don't know when this is going to air, but the thing I want to shift to by summer is more dynamic policy. So right now our policy is kind of a static policy engine. So for instance, you can say what security controls must be present to even launch Claude Code successfully with an authorization. Like if CrowdStrike's not on the device, don't launch Claude, or don't allow Claude to launch with an authorization token. And then an example of continuous is, hey, this can be your personal device. I'm fine with you running it on a BYOD or non-managed device, but if the firewall and disk encryption or screen lock are ever disabled, withdraw authorization from the Claude instance. So like those are examples of the policy that you can do right now. Where I want to get us this summer is more dynamic policy. So remember earlier I was talking about that agent loop. Like every time you travel that loop, you technically have a new context. It might only differ by a little bit, but technically it's new, right? That context has associated risk, risk of prompt injection, risk of information leakage, right? Risk. And when it comes back from the LLM, like the LLM is stateless, right? The LLM is not really what you're worried about. What you're worried about is the LLM will send some data back in what's called tool calls. And then your agent will just start executing stuff on MCP or built-in tools, right? And that's when you have a chance for data leakage, data loss, exfil, C2, et cetera. That is when permissions matter the most, right? Restrictive or permissive. And so when I say dynamic policy, what I really mean is tying the risk in the moment of the context in that loop to the permissions that are available for that tool execution in that moment, if that makes sense. So that's where I feel like we can make a lot of hay in terms of keeping things secure, but also reducing the administrative burden.
Love it. What about the risk people are worried about installing Ceros? What should they be concerned about, and how are you kind of like protecting for the user from its own product?
Yeah, let's see. So Ceros is built in the same way that we built our core authentication software. It's signed. It follows an SBOM process. It itself uses device-bound credentials. It follows standard protocols. Like everything we do is IETF or W3C or whatnot. So it's been vetted, and we're being used today by over 10 million identities for their protection. And we've had experience, defending organizations pretty much up and down the gamut, from bored kids all the way to nation state level adversaries.
Amazing. So make a case for like who should be most alerted to the exposure they have right now and these kind of like safety protocols that they should be going through. I think enterprise is all over this. They understand. Yep. If you're a small team, let's say you started, jamming away and you create a product, you have some traction, you got a dozen people. So now you have kind of like a little bit of risk there. Make make a case maybe, I guess, for those two scenarios. You have a small team, you're moving fast, you want to encourage people to like experiment, but you want to make sure they're hedged. What is most on the forefront of danger for those guys?
So here's a simple one, and this is just a news story I saw on Reddit the other day. You probably have as well. It's the guy who is like, "Hey, do I need to declare bankruptcy? My API token just got stolen, and I got a Claude bill for like a bazillion tokens." Right. So from an engineering manager perspective, there's just like a hyper practical benefit of running Ceros immediately, which is that won't happen to you. Right. That's the simple. Run it, get it out of your way. If nothing else changes, just know that using device-bound credentials, that problem is never going to happen, right?
Yeah, token theft,
service theft, or reputational damage, right? The next thing is around visibility, and I would say a lot of this has to do with. Look, I'll argue that everyone should be worried about security, but the reality is not everyone is actually worried about security. If you sell into the regulated environment, right? If you sell to people that are targets, a theft or kind of adversarial targeting perspective, this is something they're actually going to require you to start reporting on this year. Whether it's something as simple as like a third-party risk report that they want you to go through, to something more complicated, like the EU AI laws that have actually just come out. We think the U.S. auditors are actually going to start asking questions this year about AI controls. So, like, what's your example there to the auditor, and what's the control that like you actually feel good that you could respond in a situation to, and what does response even look like? So, I would say it's a pretty broad set of applicability. The set it and forget it portion is really valuable to everyone around service theft and reputational damage, but like the discovery and policy enforcement after that is like it's pretty powerful. Like, why you need to embrace AI to stay alive. I think that's just the truth now of the world. But you can still die. Right? Like, you can run fast with a sword and cut your own leg off. Ceros is going to help you not do that.
You know what why I'm really excited to throw it into Claude Code is because I've noticed that there's kind of a depleting feeling when you're using AI, particularly Claude Code. And I've been trying to figure out why, and I'm talking to a bunch of different people. And a lot of people report this. It's kind of draining at the end of the day. And there's different kind of things I'm doing as far as like making sure I get my push-ups in before I hit the computer, also staying locked in on one project, seeing it through for a full day. Those kind of things are helping. But I think a big part of it too is just kind of an innate fear of like, oh my God, I don't want to break something horrible. So from like a CYA perspective, it's like, okay, Ceros has my back. There's nothing I can do outside of, these skills that I set forth for it. And I can kind of keep an eye on what everything's doing, because that's the other part too, is that you start spinning up projects and now suddenly, you got 24 live things and like you kind of forget. So I feel like from an emotional level, just as kind of like someone out here experimenting, it feels good to know that like Ceros has your back.
Well, not even do you forget, but like you're probably working in a team, right? How do there's nothing to forget. You never know everything that's going on in your environment unless you actually have instrumentation and controls present, right? Your team, if they're a good team, are constantly experimenting. They're constantly trying new things. They're constantly discovering like prompt script patterns that they want to elevate into new skills. Why wouldn't you want a little sentry in the background on everybody's shoulder saying, hey, that skill you just pushed into the project, not to user space or not to managed and not even into a production repo, that skill is a little bit problematic because it wants to use this tool and it has this particular prompt and it's really susceptible to this style of injection. It's really susceptible to exfil if this data were ever being handled. Like, what? You're never going to keep all of that in your memory to start with. So why wouldn't you want that sort of oversight?
Very simple. I love it. Any other features or benefits you want to make sure we review?
We could talk about this for a really long time. I just try it. The bare bones is if you use Ceros, you're not going to know it's there, and it's going to protect you right out of the gate from any sort of token theft and session hijacking using advanced device-bound attestation, right? And then from there is where it can kind of help you with defending against bad things from a breach and incident perspective, to also just understanding what's going on in your environment, to also being an answer for where your customers are going to start having questions around how you manage their data in your AI systems.
Amazing. Can I ask you a personal question?
Yeah.
BeyondIdentity.ai is the website where you can check this out. It's totally free for personal use, right?
Yep.
Incredible. And it's a gorgeous website. Why is there a giant alien mothership in the hero section?
We're trying to be more fun with this particular. We're trying to show a little bit more of our personality in what we do. While we are a diverse group of people, we do have a strong interest in, I'd say, like science fiction. And sometimes it kind of feels like we're living in science fiction when you start to see what's possible and when you start to read some of the headlines. And actually, I have no idea if this is even true. I saw a headline on Reddit, so like 50-50, right? But like it was like Donald Knuth astounded that Claude Code solves an open problem for him in 1 week, right? So yeah, I don't know. It does feel like we're living in a magical time. In that, like, the things that traditionally you haven't been able to do because of the amount of people and effort it took, and the payoff just made it not seem economical. But now it's possible, and it doesn't have to be a business. It could be a personal project, like your game or whatnot. But like that level of achievement, just being able to do it, makes us feel like we're living in the future. And so I would say, we just. We're trying to show a little bit more of our kind of outlook and background, and we love dogs, and so Ceros is also kind of a little bit Cerebus inspired.
Which is the Hound of Hades, a multi-headed dog that guards the gates of the underworld to prevent the dead from leaving.
Exactly.
I love it. Yeah, that's so fun. I mean, again, like, there is an innate unease with all this because it's so exciting. I mean, that's the thing, is it's so exciting and so much fun, and you can do all this stuff, and it's nobody really knows what the limit is, and we're rushing into it. It's so fast, but there's like an underlying unease. But I feel like injecting kind of like novelty and fun into into everything, like makes it like makes me more enthusiastic about it. So I love that answer. Be like, yeah, man, we're in the future. We don't know what planet we're on right now. It's great. And balance that with some like classic Greek mythology. We all needed it. The Hound of Hades protecting our back from the Underlord.
Exactly.
Incredible. Jasson, I really appreciate it. Everybody check out and download Beyond Identities Ceros, beyondidentity.ai. Where's the best place for people to connect with you online personally?
Hit me up on X or LinkedIn.
Done and done. We will post the links in the show notes below. Of course, we'll post the links to Beyond Identity where you can check out Ceros. I'm excited to get this started. I have a big vibe code community here in Denver that's swollen to maybe 400 people, and I'm going to drop it in the WhatsApp chat and let people know about it. Thanks, Jasson.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
You are about to spend anywhere from $100,000 to $300,000 on your kid's college education, and that's not a small bet. And right now, there's a very real chance that they graduate and can't find a job, not because they weren't smart enough, not because they didn't work hard enough, but because the job market changed and nobody told them. Employers are hiring AI native candidates, people who don't just know their field, but know how to work with AI at a professional level. And most colleges are not teaching this, not even close. AInativestudent.com is the program that fills that gap. It takes high school and college students and teaches them how to actually think and work with AI the way top companies expect on day one, so your investment in their degree actually pays off. You're already paying for tuition, housing, textbooks. This is the one thing that actually makes it all worth it. Go to AInativestudent.com because a diploma is a starting point. Being AI native is what gets them hired. That's AInativestudent.com.